Batman, Prodigal Son. Somewhere in the woods of Vermont, Sunday, September 12th, 2021. It has been 8 months since the Arkham City incident and the deaths of the Joker and of Hugo Strange. It has been 7 months since the death of Harley Quinn, and it has been 6 months since Batman was nearly killed by one final trap that was sprung by the Joker in case he died, and the destruction of the Batmobile. Bruce decided to leave Gotham City for a while and take a very nice long vacation to recover. His excuse was that he had to get away from the horrors that he experienced in Arkham City, even though it was only for a couple hours. But that was his excuse, so that way people couldn't connect his absence to the Batman's absence. But the trap that he survived at Arkham Asylum gave him a perfect alibi for Batman's absence. Everybody thought that Batman died in that explosion in Arkham Asylum. But they were far from the truth, even though there were some days that Bruce Wayne wished he had died. Since the death of Talia al Ghul, Bruce Wayne has been stuck in a very bad depression. He had no hope anymore. He had no will. And now he just wanted to die himself. Despite being surrounded by the beauty of nature where he was at, in peace and solitude, it was not helping him as he thought it would. But the isolation and solitude did allow him to do a very long period of reflection. He was reflecting on where his life was going, where it was going to end. Would he be Batman for the rest of his days until he couldn't do it anymore? Or was there going to be a point in his life that he's going to have to hang up the cape and cowl and just be Bruce Wayne and try to forget about the alter ego that he forged over time in the 22 years that he was a vigilante? After coming back from a very beautiful, inspiring hike through the autumn woods, Bruce Wayne goes into his cabin that was solar powered and had some of the modern day amenities to help him get by. Even though he was isolated, he was not too isolated. He had satellite internet, a gaming laptop so he could do some gaming and also keep tabs on his business, and that was pretty much it. Bruce just checks out what he needed to check out on the laptop and read his messages on the phone, and then Bruce goes in to take a shower. He starts to shave, and as he was looking in the mirror when he was shaving, Bruce just couldn't believe how he decided to let his hair grow out. His hair was now down past his shoulders. He thought to himself, if I go back to Gotham City, I gotta cut these wild locks. After he was done shaving, he takes a nice hot shower, and then he sits in the living room, and then decides to listen to some music in the stereo system. What was he listening to? When the River Meets the Sea, a song that was made famous by the old Jim Henson film, Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, a childhood favorite from Bruce Wayne in his better days. But now he just listened to it almost constantly, thinking about Talia. And when his mind drifts to Talia's death, it began to drift to the death of other people in his life. The death of Jason Todd, the death of Dr. Leslie Tompkins, the death of Aunt Harriet, the death of Silver St. Cloud, and the death of his parents. His mind was always haunted by it. Then Bruce decides to shut down the stereo system. He's heard enough. And then he goes to make some dinner. Afterwards, he eats his dinner, and then he starts a fire in the fireplace, and he sits down with some tea, and he looks at the fire burning, and all he could do was think about Talia. He was thinking about when he first met her, 16 years ago. Both of them were young, and he was initially attracted to her, but he figured he'd never see her again. But little did he know he was wrong, and over the years, they would encounter each other. Sometimes on friendly terms, sometimes in antagonistic terms. But every time, he grew closer and closer to her. Her father, Ra's al Ghul, intended him to be her husband. Even though he fought it all the time, maybe the old African knew something that Bruce Wayne didn't, Bruce thought to himself. But what did it matter, Bruce thought to himself. At the end, she's gone forever, and he's made another mistake. Later that night, as Bruce Wayne slept, he was awakened by a horrible nightmare about Talia al Ghul and her death in the hands of the Joker. Bruce wakes up and he starts to cry. He was being constantly plagued by these nightmares since the Arkham City incident. All he could do was just tolerate it. Bruce figured that these dreams will just have to go away on their own, like the dreams that he was always having about his parents after their deaths. Early the next morning, Bruce wakes up, does his morning routines, goes out on an exercise hike, and then afterwards he sits down cross-legged on a tree stump and he begins to go into a very deep meditative state. As he was meditating, he was just trying to refocus himself, recalibrate himself mentally. Then, after he was finished, he knew what he had to do. He had to return to Gotham City. Gotham City, 3 days later. Bruce Wayne returns. On his way home, he stops by a barber shop to get his long curly locks cut back down to a manageable size. Then he returns to Wayne Manor. Before he had left Vermont, he had sent a text message to Alfred, who had went back to Michigan to visit his family and stay out there, that he was coming back home. Alfred just gave a reply that he would be back during the weekend. Bruce then goes into the old manor. He goes in and starts taking off the dust cover from the furniture. He turns on the light, and then he hears the doorbell go off. Bruce says to himself out loud, "Who in blazes is that right now?" Bruce goes to answer the door, and to his pleasant surprise, it was Jack Drake, Tim Drake's father. And Bruce says, "Oh my goodness, Jack, long time no see. How are you, man?" And then Jack Drake says, "Oh man, I thought it was you. I saw your car as I was coming home from physical therapy. Oh, it's good to see you back," Bruce says, Jack. And then Bruce goes out to help Jack's wheelchair up to the manor. Then Bruce says to Jack, "Well, Jack, I'm sorry I can't offer you anything. My refrigerator is empty." And Jack says, "It's okay, Bruce. I can stay here no more than 5 minutes. I just wanted to see you back, man. I haven't seen you since you left back in March." Then Jack goes on to say to Bruce, "Oh, Bruce, the rumors are flying all over the city that you fled, that you were never coming back to Gotham City." And Bruce says to Jack, "Oh, Jack, you old people should know I would never abandon Gotham City." And Jack replies back, "I know you wouldn't, Bruce, but after what you went through back in January, being in prison in that crazy super prison of Hugo Strange, any man would have fled. I would have done the same thing too." And then Jack asks Bruce, "So where did you go, man?" And Bruce says to Jack, "Well, Jack, I went to Vermont. I have a small cabin out there, and there I found peace being with nature." And Jack says, "Oh, that's good, man. That's very good." And then Bruce asks, "How about you, Jack? How have you been doing?" And then Jack tells Bruce of his health problems and how he just seems to be getting worse. And he says to Bruce, "I can't believe this, Bruce. Look at me. I'm 55 and I'm worse than an old man right now." And Bruce says, "Listen, Jack, don't wallow in self-pity. You got to fight and you have to push on." And Jack says, "Oh, thank you, Bruce. I needed that little pep talk. Oh, it's been so hard lately. I'm just very glad," says Jack, "that we got through Ida with no damage out to this region." And then he goes on to say, "The city was very devastated from the floodwaters, but now everything is almost back to normal. The majority of the subways are running," he says, "and the streets are drivable again, and the monorails came back into service last Friday." And then Jack excuses himself and tells Bruce he had to go. Bruce helps Jack to his car and Jack drives off. As he was driving off, Bruce sees a familiar vehicle coming up to the gate. It was a hot pink Mustang. Bruce knew whose Mustang that was, and as the vehicle pulls up to the front steps of Wayne Manor, Kathy Kane steps out of it, and she quickly runs up and hugs Bruce, and she says, "Oh, Bruce, I'm glad you're back in town. I got your text message, and I came as soon as I was free." And then the two went inside and caught up on what was going on with each other during their 6 months absence. Afterwards, Kathy says to Bruce, "Well, Bruce, I gotta go. I have to get everything packed and ready to go. I am heading out to Chicago to a huge video game and software expo out there. My company is going to unveil some new products. Unfortunately, that means you'll have to make do without Oracle, says Kathy. And Bruce says, "Don't worry, Kathy. I made do without Oracle for many years." And then Kathy smiles and she hugs Bruce and kisses him. And she says, "Hey, if you need anything, remember, I'm just a text away." And Bruce says, "Don't worry, Kathy." And Kathy leaves. After she left, then Bruce goes to the secret entrance of the Batcave, which was the grandfather clock in the study. Bruce opens up the grandfather clock by winding the hands to 10:47 when his parents died, and the grandfather clock opens up. But instead of stepping inside the elevator, Bruce uses the keypad next to the elevator. This keypad was to deactivate the security system and fully activate the Batcave since he was away for a while. He punches in the number, his date of birth, 1/13/81. Soon, Bruce rode the elevator down to the Batcave. The Batcave was now powered up, and Bruce began to pull the dust covers from all the equipment tables and everything, and then he made his way to the Bat computer, pulled out the dust covers from there, and started up the makeshift supercomputer. As soon as the computer had fully booted, and then Bruce set to update everything. And as the computer was updating, Bruce went to the vault to look for a bat suit. Most of his bat suit was destroyed, except for one that he still had left. It was his last one. And Bruce knew he was going to have to start making a new batch of bat suits. But there was another problem, too, as Bruce looked at the empty Batmobile platform. The Batmobile was destroyed. He had begun the process of building another one before his departure, but it was nowhere close to finish. If Bruce was going to go out tonight, he needed a vehicle. So Bruce makes his way down to a very deep section of the Batcave, where it was used for storage. And there he found a vehicle that would suit his needs. Even though he never liked them, but he had one just in case. It was the Bat-Cycle, and it was going to have to be put back in service. It's been years since he had used it, and Bruce knew he needed to get into action in order to get it ready for tonight. So Bruce brought the Bat Bike back up to the upper levels of the Batcave, and then he began to work on it to get it ready for tonight. After he was finished, then Bruce Wayne pours the gasoline to the tank and starts it up. Later on that night, around 8:30 p.m., on the roof of the GCPD building, even though Batman was gone for 6 months, the commissioner kept the bat signal lit every night. Deep down inside, he knew that his old friend was not dead, despite what the rumors were saying, and he knew one day Batman was going to show up again. But for some reason, tonight, the commissioner couldn't explain it. He felt like his old friend was going to show up, and he stood there on the roof, holding a file folder as he was looking up at the sky and seeing the clouds race across, passing the time. Then he heard it, a very familiar flapping of cloth in the breeze. The commissioner looked upwards towards the area where he heard the noise coming from, and above the roof of the elevator access to the roof, he sees Batman standing there with his navy blue scalloped cape flapping in the breeze. And the Batman jumps down and walks over to the commissioner, and the commissioner says to Batman, I don't know why, but something told me you were going to come back tonight. I don't know if it's police intuition or maybe I have second sight, said the commissioner. And then he goes on to say to Batman, but I knew you were not dead. I didn't believe the rumors. And then Batman says to the commissioner,
It's good to see you too.
And the commissioner goes on to explain to Batman what was going on, and he says, well, since you were gone, we were going after everybody that was involved with Arkham City. It was quite the summer of cleanup, thanks to the late Mayor Sharp's little list of all who was involved with him. We were able to make a lot of arrests and convictions, but we have one more person, says the commissioner as he was holding up the file folder in his hand, showing Batman. And then the commissioner hands the folder over to Batman. Batman grabs the folder, opens it up, and he sees a picture of a young woman, maybe a couple years older than him. She had long, curly dark hair, she had freckles and blue eyes, and she was kind of stocky. And the commissioner says, that there is Laura King. Laura King is a big-name lawyer who was involved with Strange and the mayor. She was the one that was trying to make everything look legal. She knew every legal loophole there was, and she made sure every arrest and all the activities that Tiger did stuck. And the commissioner goes on to explain to Batman, as soon as I saw her name on the list, I quickly put an undercover officer in as a secretary, and she was able to gather all the information we need on her, including the evidence that linked her and her activities to Hugo Strange. She tried to have them destroyed, but luckily she trusted my undercover officer to destroy the evidence, but she was able to, let's just say, hand it over to me. And we were going to make the arrest a week ago, but unfortunately the stupid storm disrupted everything and caused havoc throughout the city, so we were not able to do it. But tonight we're going to move in and arrest her before she decides to leave the city. Then Batman closes the file folder and gives it back to the commissioner. And the commissioner turns around as he was saying to Batman, so Batman, where were you for the last 6 months? And then when the commissioner turned around, Batman was gone, and he said out loud to himself, some things will never change. Meanwhile, in a office building in Midtown Gotham, Laura King's law firm was located on the 23rd floor of that building, and she was quickly packing everything she could, ready to flee the city. As she was cleaning out the safe in her office, she says to her bodyguard, Clyde, as soon as I'm on that airplane to France, you will be free of your duties, and then you'll be handsomely paid. I'll send you the final paycheck, direct deposit, she says. And then Clyde says, yes, ma'am. And then as she finished cleaning out her safe, she puts it all in the briefcase and closes the briefcase. And then she says to Clyde, come on, let's get out of here. All of a sudden, she hears a voice in her office say,
You're not going anywhere.
She turns to look, and right in the very corner of her office, where the wall meets the window, there was Batman, and she says, I thought you were dead. And then she quickly pulls out her gun from a holster in her dress coat, and she tries to shoot at Batman. Batman quickly ran and took cover behind a leather chair. Then her bodyguard Bruno quickly sprung into action, going after Batman. The man was massive. He was 6'5", built like a semi, and Batman knew it was not going to be easy to take him down. The two put up a very big fight in the office, trashing everything. As her bodyguard was fighting with Batman, Laura quickly hits a button underneath her desk to call for the security to come up. During the fight, Bruno lays a powerful punch to Batman, followed by Batman laying one on him. And the two kept exchanging powerful blows to each other. But it was Bruno's final blow that had Batman on the ground. And then Laura screams, "Come on, Bruno, let's get out of here. Let the guards deal with him." And the two of them ran out of the office. As Laura and Bruno were running down the hall of the office, security showed up. And Laura says, pointing to her office, "He's in there, the Batman." And the guards like, "Yes, we got this, ma'am." And they quickly draw out their guns and they were ready to go take out Batman. Soon Laura and Bruno got in the elevator and took it to the ground level garage. When the guards ran inside Laura's office, guns pointed out, Batman was gone. And then one of the guards says, "Where did he go?" And then suddenly the lights went out in the office and in the hallways. And they quickly drew out their flashlights. And one of them says, "Damn it, don't tell me it's another power outage." And then the other guard says, "Oh, I don't know what's going on, but either way, he's here somewhere. Fan out and find him." And sure enough, the guards quickly fanned out throughout the hallway to look for Batman, and Batman stealthily took them all down. After he was done, he went after Laura and her bodyguard Bruno. The two were in the parking garage running to her car. Suddenly, they reached Laura's car, a newer model BMW, and she gets inside. All of a sudden, Batman tackles Bruno, but Bruno threw Batman off of him, and Batman quickly gets back on his feet, and the two begin to fight. Laura starts her car and speeds out of the parking spot. As she was doing that, she was going to try to run down Batman. Batman quickly leapt out of the way, and she ended up running down her bodyguard Bruno, killing him. After she gets away, Batman was wishing he had his Batmobile. That way he could have called it to him, but nope. He had to run out of the parking garage and go where the Batbike was hidden. He finally gets there after what felt like an hour of running. He gets on the Batbike, starts it off, and takes off. Batman was on his bike, trying to catch up to King's BMW that had a several-minute head start as he was throttling the motorcycle, going as fast as it could go. As Laura was speeding in her BMW, she can see in the rearview mirror that Batman was catching up on his Batbike. Laura knew she had to lose Batman fast. With some quick thinking, she decided to cause a little accident. She jerks the steering wheel to the left and goes into the opposite lane of traffic. She holds steady as the incoming cars were forced to pull out the way. And then she jerks right back into the right flow of traffic, cutting off several cars, just narrowly missing them. The result was a huge car accident that resulted also in an incoming semi getting jackknifed. Laura laughed as she knew she had lost Batman. It was safe driving from here on. She was going to beat Batman. She was going to beat the police to the airport. Batman, seeing the wreck ahead and coming fast, was forced to hit the brakes. But since motorcycles don't have good brakes, he had to throw himself almost to the ground to come to a screeching halt. Then Batman gets the motorcycle back up, and he takes several side roads until he gets back onto the main road to the airport as he was picking up speed. Finally, Laura arrives at the Archie Goodwin International Airport. She gets to the line, shows her passport and plane ticket for France, and boards the plane. She sits down in first class. There was only one way to go to Paris, and that was first class, she thought to herself. As she was relaxing, waiting for the airplane to take off, the captain comes over the intercom saying that the flight will be delayed, It got Laura worried. Then she hears the police were coming into the airplane. As she turned to look behind her, she could see Harvey Bullock with several policemen and their guns drawn out. They go into the economy class first, looking for her. Then she quickly gets up from her chair and runs out of the airplane. As she runs across the connecting bridge, she makes it back into the airport, and there were more policemen. They see her and they begin to run after her. She starts running and running as fast as she could. She finally makes it out of the airport and she runs across the street, almost getting run over twice. She was heading for the parking lot, heading to her car. She finally got to her car, opened the door, and pulled out a gun. And then she used her car door as a shield and starts shooting at the police officer with her .38. In the process, she takes down 2 police officers and gets Bullock in his left arm. And as she was about to open fire again, suddenly Batman came from behind her, disarmed her, and got her in a sleeper hold and knocked her out cold. Then Batman quickly ran off. Bullock, still nursing the wound in his arm, quickly ran up and pointed the gun at her. She was regaining consciousness and Mirandized her. It was over. The last person involved with the corrupt mayor, Hugo Strange, in the Arkham City debacle was finally behind bars, awaiting trial. Well, a few days later, it was a Saturday morning. At the warehouse near the Wayne Foundation building, this warehouse serves as a place where Bruce Wayne assembles many of Batman's vehicles and does some minor maintenance of it there. Bruce was there. He was looking at a drivetrain with a inline 5 engine on it. It was the drivetrain for the unfinished Batmobile that he had begun working on prior to his departure from the city. Bruce looks at the engine that was installed on the all-wheel drive drivetrain. The engine was connected to a 10-speed automatic high-performance transmission. The engine itself was the new Americar Pulsar inline 5 engine, 3.7 liters. Bruce had modified it with high-performance parts, thermal taping wrapped around the exhaust system, and the exhaust was connected to a catalyzed high-performance racing wipe pipe that would give the vehicle dual exhaust. It also had a positive displacement supercharger installed. All in all, the vehicle would generate 800 horsepower like the previous Batmobile, and like the previous Batmobile, the engine that powered it was the P Edition, which meant that the engine ran on propane, which comes in handy in those cold winter nights in Gotham City, so the car could start without issue. Then Bruce hears a voice. "It's good to see you back, sir." He turns around behind him and sees Alfred, and he says to Alfred, "Oh, Alfred, it's good to see you again, too." And Alfred says to Bruce, "I got the note you left in the kitchen that you were here." And then Bruce says, "Yes, Alfred, I am here, and we really need to finish this Batmobile," he says to Alfred. And he goes on to explain further. "I went out last night, I used the Batbike, and I don't like the Batbike. I don't feel safe in it," he says to Alfred. And Alfred says, "I understand, sir." And then Bruce turns around, looking at the huge stacks of boxes that contain the different parts for the new Batmobile, and he says to Alfred, "Alfred, are you ready to start work on the new Batmobile tomorrow? It's imperative that we get this thing ready as soon as possible." And Alfred says to Bruce, "I am ready, sir." And then Bruce says, "All right, first thing tomorrow morning, we start on the new Batmobile." And Alfred smiles, and then he asks Bruce, "So how was your trip to Vermont?" And Bruce said, "It was peaceful and beautiful. Just what the doctor ordered," says Bruce. And Alfred says, "I am glad it worked out for you, sir. I enjoyed my trip in Michigan. It was nice seeing my family again." And then the two men smiled and walked off together. Like and subscribe. The end.